What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp here, managing editor of Fightful.com, FightfulWrestling.com, FightfulMMA.com. We have all of them there. Of course, we cover boxing as well. We have great resources like interviews with James Lynch, talking to the biggest stars in the MMA world. We have the Fightful Boxing newsletter that drops weekly. We have the Fightful Wrestling Weekly that has about 1,000 words of exclusives in it every single week. Of course, we've broken a ton of stories, have a bunch of interviews. If you haven't given Fightful.com a try, head over there. Lots to talk about tonight. UFC St. Louis. I think really, first off, I'm starting this show before the broadcast actually ends, so we can kind of talk about fights that didn't happen. Thiago Alves was supposed to be on this show, and he wasn't. And Vitor Belfort was supposed to be on this show, and he wasn't. And I think that this card definitely lost some of its luster as a result. Now, the show was still about 6 hours long. Like, that's after losing 2 fights, the show was 6 hours long. I'm not going to bore you with all the talk about how I think fight cards should be shorter, but damn, man. It's just, this card was long enough. It was about 5:45, but Zach Cummings was supposed to fight Thiago Alves on the show, and 2 days before the fight, he injured himself after falling. Bout was canceled. Mads Burnell missed weight by about 4 pounds. He ended up beating Santiago. We'll talk about that in a bit. But Uriah Hall did not weigh in. He fainted en route to weigh-ins, and the retirement bout of Vitor Belfort was delayed. Now, you know, I've been as much of a critic of Vitor Belfort as anybody else for some of the questionable things that he's done and said, like as it pertains to substances and TRT and yada yada. But I was very excited for this fight. I thought Uriah Hall was a good opponent. There were rumors that Vitor was going to be scheduled against Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping has come out and said that that is not true. So really, his retirement fight is kind of up in the air. He could always fight at 205 and fight in Brazil, like next month, I think it is. But it's a shame because he was supposed to fight on this show and he didn't get to, and it would have really, really added to this. If you're on the live chat right now, head over, ask some questions, all that good stuff. I'm going to run down the card, some of the notable. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about each of the fights, but mainly the notables, what did happen, what didn't happen. Really hope that Vitor gets on a card very, very soon. And yeah, it's just a bummer, man. It's just a bummer. Also, on the pro wrestling side, head over to Fightful.com. I have a couple of news updates over there as well. Sorry, I'm getting the questions, things like that. That's why I'm a little scatterbrained right now. The show started off, Mads Burnell, Mike Santiago. Santiago's corner might have cost him this fight. He couldn't get up and was being told to elbow instead of scramble. And I'm an advocate of elbows when you're defending takedowns, when you're on the ground and you're trying to fend off the guard and stuff. But if you're getting smothered the way he did, you need to work your way up. Mads Burnell came in a little oversized for, and he gets his win bonus, but Santiago is getting 20% of what he earned because he missed weight. Danielle Taylor and JJ Aldridge. Man, Danielle Taylor is a frustrating fighter to watch in the UFC when you saw what she was capable of outside of it. It's like she looked like she had all the potential in the world. A little undersized, sure, but she had to fight in this division to be in the UFC. She had that leg kick to right punch going. It's a thing that you see Dan Henderson do a lot in his career, but she was getting really off balance after a couple of steps, and she would land the occasional right hand, but Aldridge would pull away and really pull away in both regards, physically and metaphorically as it pertained to the fight. Taylor just hasn't improved a lot during her UFC run, and I don't think that she could stop Aldridge's rhythm. And that was really, really tough for her. And Danielle Taylor's going to run into this too because she's beaten some people that she could just outmatch as far as speed and that leg kick to straight that people just can't seem to figure. Well, her last couple of opponents couldn't seem to figure out, but yeah, man, when you see a woman like that who has met success but hasn't necessarily evolved, this guy won, and she needed to. for all the excuses of her, she should have been like 1-6 in the UFC. I know there was the fight that was overturned due to a marijuana test violation that was complete BS, but a lot of people had Kaufman winning that fight anyway. But here she is at 125. And this first round was just a ton of fun. Long leg lock battle. I'm going to have some of my catch wrestling coaches break down that round and tell me kind of what was missed there, what was on, what they did well. But it was very fun to watch. It was fantastic. They were just going at it. I kind of hoped that they would just drop into a 50-50 as soon as round 2 started and just continue it and see who won. Really technical striking and grappling at times. But it's more that she leaves her jaw out there and she gets exposed on occasion. Kalindra Faria used both hands to fight off the rear naked choke. And that was a little curious to me because you got to be able to protect your neck as well. Faria had to prevent herself from getting into the clinch at times and risk a takedown after what I showed her in the second round. This fight really could have gone either way. And Jessica, I looked as excited as a woman. Her job. She did. I think if she lost, she was gone. What was particularly curious was her post-fight speech. That was really weird. She said, all you fighters, takedowns win fights. Nobody wants to see you punch. That is not how you do a post-fight interview, because I can guarantee you guys, fans do want to see you punch. I mean, there are going to be people who want to see you wrestle. Not all the time, but hey, whatever. Oh, Guido, Canetti, and Kang. Oh, my gosh. So this was confusing. Canetti's triangle defense was very, very curious. Sometimes when you slam your opponent while you're in a triangle, you'll lock yourself in it a little bit more. But Canetti had Kang up against the cage and like gently sat Kang down and then got tapped out. And I'm like, in that situation, just go on and pick him up. Just go on and slam him down. Like, just make that effort. You can't punch somebody in the back of the head, but you can slam them in the back of their head. And that's what leads to the knockout, except for in the case of Rampage. I think it was the headbutt that led to the knockout. That was very curious. Canetti cost himself the fight. I mean, he may have lost the fight anyway. Chance of the fight there as well. When somebody starts pulling guard, like in the first, second round, you know that they are pretty much out of the fight unless they are like Damian Maia or somebody like that. So that's what Toledo Bernardo did. And Irene Aldana was just way more technical. Way more technical. I was happy that no judges gave Bernardo round 2 based on control alone. Bernardo still had the tags on her fight kit, which I thought was kind of funny. But this is really all Aldana, and this is another, like Jessica I don't think she was in danger of losing her job. But she came into the UFC with all this hype, and she had to live up to it at some point. And I thought she did tonight. I thought she looked exceptionally well. Very good tonight. As good as she's looked in the UFC. Reyes versus Provola. That was a bad idea from Provola. You can't go in there and just chuck and duck like that with Polo Reyes. What do you think that's a good game plan? Like, I don't care how confident you are in your hands, man. Like, some things are ill-advised, and that's one of them. Alex White versus James Krause. Alex White landed some harder shots early on. Krause sometimes has trouble shifting into that next gear into a fight, and it's kind of like he's in a sparring match that whole time. And I say that because, I mean, I've seen it. I saw it like on the regional ranks, like how explosive he could be and creative he could be. It's just like he's always looking to not empty his gas tank, and sometimes you have to, but it was close. White's defensive wrestling has improved so much. We saw Clay Collar just maul him a while back. But still, Krause is able to transition from one position to another with relative ease. It seemed like he was in control here and there. Like, I always kind of got the feeling that Krause was up, but White wasn't making it easy on him. And Krause looked a mess after that fight. In a row for him. He got dropped in the third round, stuffed some shots, but he let Krause get to his hips a little bit too much. So I think that's eventually what won it for Krause in the eyes of the judges. Now on to the main card. Again, guys, we'll talk more about this show on Tuesday on the Holy Smokes MMA podcast. Airs at 3 p.m. Eastern. Chael Sonnen will be joining us this week. We got pros picks for UFC 220, Bellator 192. Also, Showdown Joe will be joining me on next weekend's UFC 220 post show. James Lynch is out of the country, well, out of his country for a wedding and won't be able to join us, or else he would have been there covering the event live. Michael Johnson, Darren Elkins. Man, this was a puzzler right here. Michael Johnson dropped to 145. And the thing is about Michael Johnson is he is just such a disruptor in any division, wherever he fights. Like, he'll do things like lose 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6 in this case and still hang in there with a top 10 or maybe beat them, because after the way this first round was going, he was tagging Darren Elkins like he had a problem with that ugly-ass tattoo on Elkins' chest, and he should. It's hideous. But he was tagging Elkins with relative ease. And we saw him do that to Khabib Nurmagomedov too. Like, he connected several times on Khabib and may have put Khabib in more trouble than we've seen him in in his entire UFC career. That's what Michael Johnson is capable of. Michael Johnson is completely capable of beating guys like Edson Barboza, Melvin Gillard when Melvin Gillard was good, Gleison Tebow, Tony Ferguson, Joe Lozon, Dustin Poirier. But then, you know, he just runs into people like he gets I wish I could explain it, man. I can't say that he's like the ultimate gatekeeper, because he's not really. He's a good fighter. He's a really good fighter. It's just, man, I haven't figured Michael Johnson out yet, because I mentioned that streak, and I mentioned, you know, the aforementioned fights like Elkins and Khabib. He was in both of those fights. He went to the scorecards with Dariush and Diaz, and the Diaz fight was a fight of the night. He beat Dustin Poirier with the quickness. His fight with Justin Gaethje was a fight of the night. Like, he's not getting blown out of the water here per se. He's hanging in there. So, like most guys, if they've lost 5 of 6, I'd be saying maybe you need to do something else, especially if you've been finished 3 times in a row. Not Michael Johnson, man. And Darren Elkins, what a story that guy is. He'll be 34 this year. And I'm pretty sure it was after he lost to Hakron Diaz at the end of 2014 that he considered retiring, and he took a lot of time off. He didn't fight from December 14 until October 15. And since then, he hasn't lost. He's won 6 in a row. He is 1 win away from tying the featherweight record for most wins in the UFC, along with Max Holloway. And Max Holloway is the only person with a longer winning streak than him. Darren Elkins' resilience in being able to withstand that storm that Michael Johnson put him through in the first round and to tap him out, that's just great. Because as you'll hear about with Kamaru Usman, like, Darren Elkins needed a finish, man. Darren Elkins had only had, like, in his UFC career, and which has lasted a very long time. Like I said, this was his 13th win. This was only his third or fourth finish. And during this winning streak, he only had 1 other finish. You can't do that in that featherweight division. You got to make noise in order to get the big fights. But I think he will get a pretty big fight now. You have to. He's a top 10 guy who beat a top 10 lightweight guy. And, you know, I've said before, I don't necessarily think that Michael Johnson belongs in that UFC top 10 because he loses a lot of his fights, but I will, and I don't think he belongs in the top 10, but he has top 10 talent still. Top 10, and he's only 31. I think he'll be 32 this year, but it's a puzzle, man. And it's, as Sammy Olay says, the only puzzle is the damage tattoo. Yeah, that's an ugly ass tattoo. Kamaru Usman defeated Emil Weber Meek. So Usman, another guy that I thought needed a finish. He won. So 5 decisions in his last 6 fights, but he is on a 7-fight winning streak. He is doing fantastically. This was a big win for him. Just a dominant wrestling performance that he had here. And like, Meek was making him pay for those takedown attempts by throwing elbows. And I love that. I love using the elbows offensively and defensively rather. I love using the elbows defensively, but making them your offense like that. Because if you're laying in the guard of somebody and you're low in the guard, you open yourself up to those elbows, to the top of the head, to the side of the head. If you are up higher in the guard, you don't necessarily have that because you don't have the separation. I think elbows these days are much more useful than punches off of your back because it lets you create more distance. It lets you create more velocity because when you have all this extra here to throw at somebody, you don't get that distance. You don't get that velocity, and you don't get that the violence that comes out of it. But those elbows, not only that, man, those will slice you up too. That'll leave your dome rocked. So I did like that, but this was all Kamaru Usman, man. Like, what can I say? It was an impressive wrestling performance outside of the first lazy takedown attempt that he almost had to pay for. It took him a while to work out of that guillotine. I don't think that it was locked on very tight, but you can't go in there against a UFC fighter and throw a lazy guillotine like that or a lazy double leg like that because you're going to get guillotined, and he almost did. After the fight, he cut a promo, and he said that he was the most dominant fighter and said that he was at 30%. And I'm thinking, bro, why are you saying you're at 30%? Like, did you leave your Bluetooth on? Is your charger at home? Why are you like, give us an explanation. Were you hurt? Bad weight cut? Something happened personally? And like, I don't know. I'm asked who I think Darren Elkins should fight next. I'll get to that in a moment. I think that Kamaru Usman probably fight Damian Maia. And I say that as opposed to a Santiago Ponzinibbio or a Darren Till because I don't know who gets Woodley next. I would imagine Covington or Dos Anjos. You could do Covington and Usman because they're both wrestlers and maybe that'll negate each other. But I like the idea of Maia more because he's a threat on the ground. Like in the Covington Usman fight, whoever gets out wrestled is probably just going to get out wrestled that entire fight. But if it's Damian Maia, he's going to work and threaten submissions and things like that. Either that or Kamaru Usman's going to knock him out. Take his spot in the top 5 like he should. Going on in that welterweight division with Ponzinibbio on a hot streak, Darren Till on a hot streak. I think, Masvidal turned down Usman. I think Usman probably beats him. I really do. Covington and Dos Anjos are both hot right now. So you got 5 guys there who with one more win could be contenders in that division and fight Tyron Woodley. Like that division just got cooking over the past year. It needed a little bit of a break. It needed the logjam of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, I think. To say, and I didn't like it then, but now we got Dos Anjos, Covington. Paige Vanzant dropped another fight. Her first fight since 2016, late 2016, broke her arm rather, in the first round, so she said, and her corner didn't stop the fight. What? Like, I get it, gritty, and you want to give your person an opportunity to get their win bonus, but my God, man, if your fighter says, I've broken my arm, you call for an end of the fight. That's it. It's over. No, they didn't. Paige Vanzant went for a hip throw. This garbage hip throw keeps popping up in women's MMA, and I hate it. I hate it, especially at these high levels of women's MMA. Top 10 fights like this. Top 15 fights, rather. It was more of a headlock takeover than a hip throw because there was no hit to it. She, like, as they teach you the technique, you show your ass, essentially. And that's what it was. And when you do that, you run the risk of getting your back taken. And that's what happened to Paige Vanzant. She had to fight that off for quite a while. She landed a takedown in the second round, but Jessica Rose Clark just took control and handled business there. I thought that Paige Vanzant did exceptionally well in the third round for not throwing her right hand at all, keeping distance with strikes, things like that. But, man, she left her feet 4 times in the first minute on strike attempts, from kicks, punches, everything, man. Like, it was so weird. Like, I get it. You know, you're young, you're athletic, you have that ability, but come on. Vinny says, I'm sorry, but Paige Vanzant has to be the most overhyped fighter in the UFC. I don't think they've hyped her like abilities or anything. They've hyped that she's a pretty marketable girl. And I thought that up until last year that she had a ton of potential. She just hasn't necessarily evolved. I will say that she adapted well in that third round. I thought that she adapted exceptionally well. But that wasn't to be. Jessica Rose Clark, it's a big win for her too, because she needed to make an impression after her debut. Like she got her debut, but then she did this turnaround really quickly, and she made, I thought, a pretty good statement here. And this is from a woman who at one point, like, God, she only won 1 of 4 fights, I think, but one of them was like a fight that she won in Japan and was overturned because she missed weight. It was so stupid. It was against Emil Uriah, but she ran into she ran into Sarah Kaufman and stuff like that earlier last year. So she wasn't going to beat Sarah Kaufman. No offense to her, but Paige Vanzant, hell of a win for Jessica Rose Clark. And now she's stepped into this division, and she missed weight her first fight. She didn't this time. She showed up on weight, looked great, and I'd imagine she'll be a person that the UFC looks to get on their Australia cards from now on. They could use some juice on the next one. Not that she has a lot of juice, but they just lost Robert Whittaker, which is a bummer. I didn't get to do a fight or an update video on that, but yeah, Yoel Romero is going to fight Luke Rockhold for the interim UFC middleweight championship. I don't know why there's an interim title already. Robert Whittaker just got awarded the undisputed championship. Such a mess. I tried to explain to my wife the undisputed and interim middleweight championship situation recently, and she was like, that is so goddamn confusing. And it was. Main event. My God, Jeremy Stephens. I tweeted that he hasn't been the knockout artist the UFC paints him out to be, or he does. And I stand by that. He hasn't been. Coming into this night, he had 1 knockout in the past 4 years, and he missed weight when he did it. But he made up for that tonight. Do I think that he is as good as he's ranked? Maybe not. I'll have to take a look at the rankings. He's another one. He's almost like Michael Johnson territory, where he can lose a lot of fights in a row or a lot of fights in a very short amount of time, but he can always hang with these top fighters. That's always the thing about Jeremy Stephens. He can always hang with a lot of these top guys. And I didn't think the Gilbert Melendez win meant that much, because what is Gilbert Melendez these days without USADA, and after all the wars he's been through and all the cage miles and all that? I thought that Dooho Choi looked really good early on. He was keeping his distance. He was getting out of the way of Stephens' strikes. But, man, I don't think there was any way Stephens could have, I don't want to say kept that pace, but, man, kept that output for 5 whole rounds. Jeremy Stephens was in there throwing to throw, like throwing to knock Dooho Choi's head off. And eventually he did. And some of the ground and pound, the elbows and strikes that he landed on Dooho Choi on the ground were just disgusting. Just disgusting. Pretty incredible, I thought. That was the type of win that Jeremy Stephens needed to, like, because Gilbert Melendez, it's a nice fancy win to have on your resume and stuff, and Dooho Choi did lose to Cub Swanson, so it was obvious that he couldn't hang with like Cub Swanson. But it's been a while. I mean, Barao was 2 years ago, but I mean, he had that Moicano and that Edgar those 2 losses sandwiched right between Barao and Moicano. Like, when he gets those big wins, he always drops fights right after him. Like, look at the guys now that mean something. He beat Rafael Dos Anjos in 2008, and then he turned around and he lost to Lozon and Tebow. He beat Darren Elkins in 2014. Then he loses to Swanson and Oliveira. He beat Bermudez, then he lost to Holloway. That's going to happen, my man. Beat Barao, lost to Edgar Moicano. Now, do I think this is one of those the situations? No, I don't. I don't put Dooho Choi in any of those guys' categories necessarily. Probably even Elkins. I think Elkins probably takes down Dooho Choi and beats him at this point. But Jeremy Stevens still getting it done, man. He's 31. He'll be 32 this year. But the thing is, he's fought 40-something times that we know of. I always say that about these guys who were fighting before like 2005, 2006, because it's just you don't know what has been counted, what hasn't been counted. Like, it's just there were a lot of fights that may have passed the Sherdog databases or the Tapologies or the mixedmartialarts.coms. He's hanging around in that division, and I got to say that's impressive because I've doubted him for a long time. I thought maybe he stood a pretty good chance against Melendez. I'm sure if somebody goes back to the preview, they'll find me saying otherwise. But looking back, I think I thought that he stood a pretty good chance against Barao too, because I thought Barao was overrated at that point. But I'm very impressed with his ability to put Dooho Choi away, despite it not working out in the first round. He didn't try to pace himself and slow himself down after that, after he didn't meet that success. And Dooho Choi he's got to face his mandatory military time for South Korea soon. Sucks. It's not going to be as long as Korean Zombie missed, though, and Korean Zombie's always getting hurt. And he missed a long time before he had to do his military service, and then he's only fought once since then. So it's going to be a lot different because Korean Zombie was supposed to fight in July, but he pulled out with a knee injury and didn't work out. So Dooho Choi also isn't at the place in his career where Korean Zombie was then. Korean Zombie came off of a title loss. So, I mean, he's in a main event, but it doesn't necessarily have that steam behind it. Jimmy Smith signed with the UFC, as C. Phoenix pointed out. That's a great signing. Now, here's my thing. If I'm the UFC, I maybe see if he wants to do some play-by-play. I thought the guy tonight did very well, a good step up from his previous performances. But when you got Joe Rogan there, and then behind him you got Dominic Cruz there, and behind him you've got Daniel Cormier there, maybe interchangeable in that regard. Behind him you got Paul Felder there. Where does Jimmy Smith fit in? I don't know, but he is exceptional. He is awesome. I think that he calls the action with a great sense of excitement, great knowledge. His appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast recently is a must watch. And Joe Rogan had a hand in getting him hired, from what I understand. But it's funny because I thought that Joe Rogan was a necessary voice for the UFC a few years ago, because I thought that 2 or 3 years ago they didn't have any good color commentators to back him up. And Dominic Cruz has really evolved and become great. He doesn't have that sense of excitement that Joe Rogan does, but Daniel Cormier does. I think that Daniel Cormier is the successor to Joe Rogan. But Jimmy Smith ain't a bad one to have around. And, there are always rumors when Joe Rogan's contract is coming up, like maybe he'll stop doing this. Maybe he'll just stop. He'll call it quits, not re-up, but he keeps doing it, and it's for the lesser schedule each time. So if the UFC expands their schedule, maybe it becomes more of a possibility, but I can't imagine Daniel Cormier fights all that much longer. Guys, I want to apologize about this being in 2 videos. Now I got to stay up, edit, put these 2 videos together, get the audio going, all that stuff. Any questions you all have, send them to me at Sean Ross Sapp on Twitter. Head over to Fightful.com. We have exclusives every single day. Wrestling, MMA, boxing. Taking it by storm, my friends. Let people know about these shows. Our UFC shows don't do as much traffic as our wrestling shows. I know, because MMA podcasting is kind of like, it's in its infancy, and we're working to advance that. So let us know what you want to see, what kind of breakdowns you want to hear, things like that, who you want to see on these shows. Maybe I'll reach out to somebody. But follow us at Fightful Online. Go over to Instagram and follow us at Fightful Online. We're doing a t-shirt giveaway. So you can see there, it ends in a couple days. You can find out how to win a free Fightful t-shirt. Thank you guys so much. Leave us a thumbs up. It really helps. If you're on iTunes, 5-star reviews, those help out a lot. Subscribe. Turn your notifications on. Till next time, guys, thank you so much. Fightful.com. We are out.